Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Expressions for the New Indian Express. I have with me Professor D.P. Singh, who's the man in the hot seat. Today he released the NIRF rankings. He must have got a lot of plaudits and I'm sure some brickbats, of course. That's part of the job. But congratulations for releasing them virtually, I think, as on schedule. It must have been a mammoth task, but really well done. I have with me Dr. S. Vaidya Subramaniam, who's VC of Shastra Deemed University. Dr. Vaidya Subramaniam, I believe Shastra has done well in the rankings, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for being with us, especially to Professor Singh, because he has possibly one of the busiest jobs in the country today, figuring out what to do and what is the way forward with the higher education system in India. Not just, of course, the traditional and conventional questions of raising the gross enrollment ratio, but also the new kind of learning that we need to instill among teachers as well as students. So it's a mammoth task. But
Yes.
I think given that you've been a VC of three very distinguished universities, and among them one of India's oldest, Banaras Hindu University, I think you're eminently qualified for this. And also 5 years at NAAC, so such a track record. Welcome, Professor Singh, again. And I'd like to ask you straight away about the NIRF, because I think that's very much, that is, it's very newsy. How did you manage to complete the task, and are you satisfied with the results?
Thank you, Kaveri. Thank you, Professor Vaidya. Thank you, Daniel, for giving me this opportunity to interact on this platform. As you have asked about NIRF, I just want to make it very clear that it was released by our Honorable Human Resource Development Minister, along with the Minister of State for HRD. And this NIRF is actually now dealt by the National Board of Accreditation, NBA.
NA, yeah.
Yes, we UGC and AICT are part of it, and therefore I take this opportunity to congratulate all the institutions who have figured in the top ranked institutions, including Professor Vaidya's university, and they deserve appreciation. And this India rankings, how this is called now, was started 5 years back, and during these years, the participation is increasing year by year. Actually, whether it is India rankings or whether it is, because yesterday only, this QS World Ranking, World Ranking University was also announced by the HRD in the presence of Honorable HRD Minister, particularly for Indian University, in which under 203 our institutions, they are figured in top 200, and 21 institutions are there in top 1,000. All this kind of rankings actually, they provide an opportunity to introspect the institutions of their performances, where they can go further, what are the chances of improvement. So this is the reflection in terms of the quality, in terms of excellence, in terms of research, in terms of various other parameters which are there. So I congratulate all the institutions who are there, and I would request other institutions also to go for it. And actually, in the presence of Honorable HRD Minister, I appeal to all the higher education institutions to participate in the NIRF ranking. Thank you, Kaveri.
Just one particular question, and then I'll ask Dr. Vaidya to take over for a bit. We've been thinking of a new model of education, especially during this time when we've had so much of reverse migration. The talk of reskilling has happened. The utility of degrees, there's a lot of unemployment. So is there some thinking that's going on at the level of UGC of linking a new higher education policy with employment, empowerment, and innovation. And how can this be done? I'm aware, of course, of NSDC and all the skilling institutions that the government has, but is there something that the UGC needs to take the lead on?
Yes, University Grants Commission has been conscious of this skilling, of the vocational education, of the professional development, and also for this, the UGC is already having some schemes. We are having this Bachelor's of Vocational Program, we are having a Master's Vocational Program, and then a few years back, we started community colleges scheme, we started Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay Kaushal Vikas Kendras. We have a scheme of add-on vocational programs along with the general stream of the undergraduate programs. So they are there, but now we are emphasizing it, and we are also looking at the apprenticeship embedded programs along with the general education. We are also engaging ourselves with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and together we will come out with something new for the betterment of the skill development of the learners.
At the outset, congratulations again, sir, for being a very critical part and ensuring the release of NIRF 2020, which I think was the most awaited moment for education enthusiasts like us. And a double congratulations because BHU is figuring in the top 3 and an institution that you headed. So I'm sure you'll be proud of the institution that you headed back, a great institution founded by Mahamana, and it's a wonderful institution. So congratulations again on that.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor.
Sir, if you look at the last 3 months, definitely, COVID has brought about an unexpected and an unavoidable change in the university education ecosystem itself. And many of the institutions and universities, they had their own challenges. And if you look at the evolution of the Indian higher education system itself, it had its own challenges. It continues to have a lot of challenges, and it will continue to have more challenges in the future. But going back and seeing the challenges that you faced pre-COVID, what comes to your mind as to what is that challenge that was addressed by COVID without having to really make any major policy changes? Has COVID been an instrumentality of a natural solution provider that otherwise we couldn't have done had COVID not been here? So was it a natural game changer? What comes to your mind when you talk about that?
Very pertinent observation, Professor Vaidya, and I must appreciate your observation. And certainly this COVID-19 pandemic, because of that, we are passing through very unprecedented times, very difficult times, very challenging times. But at the same time, the changes which have emerged out of this pandemic also provides us some opportunities for the learners, opportunities to do something new for the higher education institutions, and also to innovate new tools, new technologies, new equipments, and new ways to deliver our curriculum. So in that context, if I look at this in that way, then this COVID-19 has provided us an opportunity to promote online education, the e-learning, which is perhaps the need of the hour, because of we have to maintain social distancing or physical distancing, not in foreseeable future, but I think for a longer duration, particularly during the next academic session. And there, although online education was there in the form of SWAYAM, in the form of MOOCs, in the form of SWAYAM Prabha, and the UGC framed its regulations for SWAYAM in 2016, but that was providing only up to 20% online content, along with the conventional type of face-to-face education or the ODL programs. Now, after this pandemic, and keeping in view that we have to maintain social distancing or physical distancing on the campuses for the longer duration, we have thought of some major changes in our regulatory framework. And one of them is related to promoting blended mode of education. That means we have thought of increasing increasing online content from 20% to up to 40%. It means that all the higher education institutions will have an opportunity to have this component on their campuses along with the face-to-face. And through this, we can maintain the social distancing, physical distancing in the classrooms, in the laboratories, and the campuses as such. And besides that, another major shift we have thought of, and which is now in pipeline, and maybe soon we will be having the regulations, integrated regulation for ODL and online education. Earlier, as you are aware, that we were having two regulations. One was for open and distance learning. Then we were having separate regulation for online. So in terms, as far as the regulatory framework is concerned for the online regulation, it is a recent phenomenon. And only recent in the January 2020, we have selected some of the universities, including yours, for conducting the online programs. And but now, because it's COVID-19, and also in line with the budget speech of the Honorable Finance Minister of last year, and also of the announcement of the Honorable Finance Minister, which was there in on 17th of May, this PM E-Vidya program under the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, and which also includes providing opportunity to 100 top-ranked universities of the country to automatically, they can run the online programs. So keeping all these developments, keeping in view the situation arises because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also to keeping in view the social distancing and other aspects, the UGC has revisited on the basis of the recommendations of the expert committee, its regulations, and most likely soon after the approval of the Ministry of Human Resource Development, we will be notifying this integrated online and ODL programs regulation of UGC, in which I would like to make a mention of this, that earlier the benchmark or the eligibility condition was 3.26 NAC and 100 overall category under the NIRF. Now we are relaxing it at 3.26 in place of and or 100 top-ranked universities in the NIRF ranking, and they will be eligible without the prior approval of the UGC, in line with the announcement under the PM with the program. But again, keeping in view the situation which is there because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have considered that for this particular academic session, 2020-21, we will be lowering down this bar of 3.26 to 3.01, and in place of and or under top-ranked universities under NIRF to also conduct, they can also conduct online and ODL programs, but with the prior approval and screening of the University Grants Commission.
Okay, so
these are some major changes which we have thought about. They are in pipeline. Once they are in the form of the regulations, they are notified by the Government of India, MHRD, then they will be available for the universities, and universities will be benefited to a large extent.
Yeah. In fact, writing for New Indian Express, so I think this is the headlines, Kaveri, actually. Yes. The top 100 NIRF or 3.26 without approval with UGC, or 3.01 with prior approval of UGC is a welcome move. That I would say is also going to increase the gross enrollment ratio, providing access to formal degree programs. So having said that, in fact, you have started this interaction with a big bang announcement, I must say. So the evolution of UGC, if you look at from the time that it started, it was viewed more as, a grant disbursing authority. But over a period of time, the pronounced involvement of UGC in various policy reforms, if we look back, has been increasing year on year. And as we speak, you have just come out with a major policy reform that you just now shared with us. Now, looking at that, this is to address the online education. Are we also looking at the need for revisiting some of the norms and standards which are more suited for the regular conventional campuses, which also need to be reviewed in the light of what we are going to see moving forward, like big buildings, 30 square meter per student. In fact, I did a quick calculation and I found that this 30 square meter per student is almost equal to a low-cost housing scheme. So do we actually require this much of building for students? So can we also equally expect such path-breaking reforms in the non-digital requirement so that there is a good blend, since you're also moving towards blended form of education? How can we see a change in norms and standards that ensures this blending smoothly with physical and the digital infrastructure?
I agree with you. I agree with once we promote blended mode of education, once we promote online education, then perhaps we have to certainly relook at all these aspects and dimensions which are there related to infrastructure, and we have to consider the facilities which are related for the digital development of the campuses, and to provide those facilities to the students, to the faculty members, and more for the promotion of the e-learning and online education. But here, Professor Sastra, I would like to emphasize one thing, because some debate is going on about the significance of the teachers and the online education. I am of the opinion, perhaps the role of the teachers will be going to be more important, more significant, because they have to think of new things, they have to develop e-contents, they have to make it joyful, they have to make it more interactive, and they have to make it more learner-centric, and therefore they have to equip themselves, and therefore capacity building of our faculty members is required in a big way. So UGC also thinking about this, and we would be requesting to higher education institutions to devise ways and mechanisms and to develop their campuses to facilitate this e-learning, online learning, by having the appropriate facilities on the campuses related to digital development and digital education, digital learning, but at the same time, through our human resource development centers, which are 66 in this country in different universities, then this MHRD has also identified some of the institutions at the national resource centers. So through NRCs and through HRDCs, we would be taking up the capacity building programs in a big way for the learning. So the role of teachers, it was important earlier also, it is important today also, and it is going to be more important in the times to come, particularly for the e-learning.
So if you look back, you've been the Vice Chancellor for 3 of India's most reputed universities and also Director of NAC. Sometimes you would have told yourself that you wanted to do something, but then you couldn't do because the policy vehicle was not moving that fast during those times. Now you are at the helm of the affairs of UGC. Do you have any such experiences now that you were not able to do as a Vice Chancellor or Director of NAC? But now here you're sitting as a chairman of UGC, and here is a time that is appropriate to disrupt the policy and come with some creative decisions. What would that be? Since you already touched on teachers, can you come out with some creative policies that can empower the teachers to get into this blended mode?
Actually, Professor Sastra, we have already started it. Now I have completed 2.5 years in UGC. From the day when I was thinking about this and whatever, because I was sitting on the other side of the table. And you have also mentioned about the NAC, which is the accreditation body, and that was also another side of the table. But we realized that one thing is very important. What for the higher education institutions are, and what is the purpose, and what changes we like to see in the younger generation, and how we want to develop our learners. We talk of developing good human beings, we talk of developing responsible citizens, we talk of environmentally conscious youth, we also talk of students which take care of the social cohesion, national integration. They take pride in the national issues and national symbols, etc., etc. So how these things can be developed and what is the intervention at the policy level or by the regulatory bodies, we thought of that. And you may be aware, you are not maybe, you are very well aware that, and you have been part of it also, that UGC in the beginning of 2018 came out with the quality mandate. And that was in the form of a resolution after consultation with all the vice chancellors of country. All the categories of the institutions were there: the central university, the state university, the private university, the deemed universities, the IITs, IIMs, ICERs, NITs, all were there. And then we decided about this to have this quality mandate with several verticals. Actually, this was the major intervention of a regulatory body, which actually the changing role of UGC, not as regulator, but also as facilitator, as friend, philosopher, guide, as a catalyst, as a torchbearer organization. We started all those things. And under this, we came out with some new initiatives, and now we have completed that in the form of the outcomes, and all those outcomes in the form of guidelines, in the form of frameworks, in the form of research schemes. They are there on our website. I would like to make a mention of that we want that our learners and the campuses should be value-based. We should have value-based governance, we should have value-based institutions, we should have value-based teaching learning, and then we should develop the responsible citizens who are conscious about the fundamental duties, about their constitutional values, and their conduct is value-based. So for this purpose, we came out with one document, that is Mulya Pravaha. That is for the guidelines for the inculcation of human values and professional ethics. We also want our campuses, that the campuses should be eco-friendly and sustainable. And for that, we came out with a document, a framework with the name of SATAT, which is there for the eco-friendly and sustainable campus, taking into account the various dimensions related to environment and sustainability, whether it is related to greening the campus, whether it's related to water management, energy efficiency, waste management, etc., etc. All those aspects, roof water harvesting, all these things are there in the SATAT. Similarly, for the students, we came out with one very different type of curriculum, that is for developing life skills, Jeevan Kaushal. If we want to see that our youth, after when they came out from the campuses and they enter into the world of work or some other employability aspects, then they become successful. And to become successful, they require communication skills, they require leadership skills, they require entrepreneurial skills, they also require some set of human values and professional ethics. So this Jeevan Kaushal we have developed for them. We have also came out with the Diksharam, which is the student induction program for the first time. We have developed it for 6 days for all the institutions who are coming from from the villages, from the rural areas, from the tribal areas to the campuses. Then we also developed this learning outcome-based curriculum framework, LOCF, at the undergraduate level, and that is already available for more than 40 subjects. And so once the student or his or her parents are aware that after going through this program, what he or she is going to achieve in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the skills, in terms of attitudes, in terms of values, in terms of the personality traits. Similarly, for teachers, we came out with this faculty induction program. That is a major policy intervention, faculty, and we have made it mandatory for all the newly recruited teachers as assistant professor, they have to undergo for this faculty induction program. And this is not actually subject specific. It is of generic nature and keeping in view the role perception of a faculty member of the higher education institutions and the issues related to environment and sustainability, issues related to gender sensitization, issues related to social cohesion and national integration, issues related to disability. All of these are there in the inculcation of values and professional ethics. in this 1 month Guru Dakshata, we have given this name Guru Dakshata, Faculty Induction Tour. Similarly, all these initiatives have been there, keeping in view what type of campuses we want, what type of faculty is required on the campuses, and what type of changes we want to bring in the personality, overall development of the holistic personality of the students. So these are some policy interventions which I used to thought when I was the Vice Chancellor, and now I am facilitating the higher education institutions. And after this COVID-19 and subsequent national lockdown, I requested by writing a letter to all the Honorable Vice Chancellor and all the principals that we should make productive use of this period. And I requested all the Vice Chancellor and the principals to constitute an expert group of 5 to 10 faculty members and to develop institutional implementation plans so that after reopening of the campuses, all these initiatives can be implemented on their campuses.
You know, we saw the kind of ferment in many universities before the lockdown, you know, on various issues, beginning with the Rohit Vemula suicide, you know, the protests in Jamia, and of course the protests in Jadavpur and Jawaharlal Nehru University. So that sort of stirred a debate, not just on national TV screens and, you know, in with very aggressive anchors, but also among people and students and teachers, that what are campuses for? After all, when you're young, you do believe in freedom of expression, but are there limitations to this freedom of expression? So do campuses become a place where young people can experiment with ideologies, and therefore there can be a certain amount of dissent which may not always be palatable to authorities, or is it purely for academic learning where you know, that is the sole focus, and you don't necessarily encourage this kind of political activity? What is your opinion on this? Because I think before the lockdown, this was possibly one of the biggest issues facing higher education at that point.
The purpose of the educational institutions to develop students, all aspects of their personality, whether it is physical, whether it is mental, whether it is intellectual, whether it is psychological, whether it is emotional, even whether it is spiritual.
Right.
So the holistic development of the personality of the learners. And for that purpose, whatever is required, that should be there on the campuses. I will not go into the details of various things which you have just mentioned. But again, I am of the opinion that the teacher-taught relationship should be strengthened. And I always say that the teachers should have love for the learners and love for the teachers. And the total educational process, that should actually revolve around learning to know good, learning to do good, and learning to be good. Right. That is the sole purpose of the educational process and the educational institutions. Developing holistic personality and learning to know good, learning to do good, and learning to be good. That should be the actually sole purpose. And now it depends on the higher education institutions how they realize this broader perspective and the larger goal of the higher education per se.
So you saw some protests in your old campus as well, BHU, especially among the young women. What went through your mind at that point?
No, I was not there that time.
I know you were not, but
I was not there. I was not there, and I have been lucky in that way. As Professor Vaidya knows it, that there was no protest at all.
Right.
When I was Vice Chancellor, and my actually thinking has been to establish a dialogue.
Right.
And I'm of the opinion that the educational institutions are for the students.
Right.
And therefore they want a hearing and they want to talk to their head of the institution. So some mechanism for grievance redressal should be in place. And whatever comes, that should be resolved. There were some issues which came to my mind, and at the same point of time, I discussed with the students directly, and those were resolved. I think because they also understand that their issues or their grievances, their queries have been addressed by the head of the institution, and therefore those things did not happen.
And in fact, I've known Professor Singh to be a very student-friendly policy maker. So he's being very, very empathetic.
We need more such VCs, I think.
Very empathetic to student needs. Now, again, you started off with the Big Bang announcement on the online education and ODL education and how they are going to be integrated. Now, that again resonates with Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we want to be self-reliant.
Right.
And if we recall, the Prime Minister 2 years back in a bilateral summit was also mentioning how India has the potential to export its education and more particularly its soft education like yoga, Sanskrit, and other forms of education. Now, in this online education that you are planning, do you have the plan to also open it up to a learner outside India so that there is no territorial jurisdiction? Any learner wherever in the world can learn. And given the fact, engineering and all of these cannot be given online because of the Supreme Court has also mentioned that you cannot do online or ODL in engineering. So what will be the reasonable restrictions? And at the same time, how much of freedom will institutions get to provide this online education to a learner community that goes beyond Indian borders?
Professor Sastra, actually, for in the online revolution, there is no territorial jurisdiction. It is open for all. So anybody sitting anywhere can register itself. Only the requirement is the passport and the Aadhaar. These are the prerequisites, and there is no territorial jurisdiction for the online programs is concerned. But you have given some new dimension to it, and I think as a nation, we should think of our indigenous knowledge, our traditional wisdom, our ancient wisdom, and as you mentioned about yoga also, and therefore, not only yoga, but there are a number of things which are
many.
Yes.
The whole world want to know, and they want to learn new things which are there in the traditional wisdom of our country. Whether it is related to sustainability, whether it is related to various environmental practices which are there in our cultural heritage, or whether it is related to Ayurveda or Ayush, whether it is related to peace, non-violence, and
astrology,
universal value system, they are there. So actually, it is a challenge for us, all the academic fraternity and all the higher education institutions which will be taking all these online programs, so that to showcase the whole world the strength of India as a nation, and that also contributes in the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and also whatever this, because our PM actually we call that vocal for local. Actually,
yes.
When we think of local, that means we have to go back to our basics.
Correct.
We have to go back to our basics, our Indian way of living, our family institutions, our value systems, our practicing of the universal values, truth, righteous conduct, peace, non-violence, and love, etc., etc. So whatever strength as a nation we have, we should develop courses on that, and then the whole world is open for it.
Right. So is there a related opportunity for India to, in this moment when the rest of the world seems to have extended the online education and campuses will take time to open, is there an opportunity for India to actually save billions of dollars, millions of dollars in the outgoing foreign exchange on students who used to apply to foreign universities?
Yes, because we can see that because of the COVID-19 pandemic,
right,
and because of the psychology which is going behind it, many of the students which were going outside India for the higher education, and it is expected that during this period that number would decrease.
Right.
Would decrease, and therefore it's again a challenge for the best performing institutions in India to accommodate these bright minds who were planning to go abroad, and how they will be here in India, and to provide appropriate courses of their choices in the Indian campuses also.
Right.
This is going to be a short of in terms of the in terms of, as you mentioned, dollars or something, and then also in terms of the brain gain type of thing.
So you must be getting questions all the time about the exams, academic calendar. There's so much of anxiety among students and parents. So what can you tell us about the academic calendar? Will it be curtailed? Will it be reinvented? How will that happen?
Kaveri, actually, UGC came out with the guidelines.
Right.
In April itself, after the subsequent lockdown, on the basis of the recommendation of an expert committee. And then we discussed it in the commission, and we came out with those guidelines for academic calendar and the examination. And they were of advisory nature. They were of the academic calendar was suggestive, keeping in view the situation at that time,
right.
and the situation which would be there in the foreseeable future. And on the basis of that, we suggested that we can have examinations if situation permits so.
Right.
In July, then we suggested that in August we can start the teaching of the new batch, and in September for the September for the new batch, and August for the old batch.
Old batch, yeah.
This was there, but again, keeping in view the situation which is now and which is likely to be, if need be, we have to relook on this, and we are also preparing guidelines for the reopening of the campuses.
Right.
How to maintain the social distancing, what will be the size of the classroom, as Professor Vaidya Sahab has also mentioned about the online promotion. So maybe we have to take several activities. Say, for example, the admission through in the online mode, and we can maintain the social distancing or physical distancing by having initially online classes, and we can also have by blended mode of education. And so that all the students need not come on the campuses, and then we can have multiple shifts also. We can have few days online, we can have few days face-to-face teaching, we can have few days laboratory work, and we can ask some students to go for the project work, cases, etc. So idea is to maintain social distancing, to have less number of the students on the campuses. So these guidelines related to reopening of campuses, we would be finalizing and sending. But again, because the country is so wide, the situation is diverse. The situation related to COVID-19 pandemic is not the same in all parts of the country, and even in all parts of the cities. So higher education institutions have to take a call. Through their appropriate institutional bodies, how to adopt or adapt these guidelines and how to implement. But the one thing is that is of prime importance is the health and safety of the students and the faculty and the staff which is there, and therefore the institutions have to have the various things which are related to precautionary measures and the preventive measures, and also related to issues related to hygiene, issues related to sanitization, issues related to other protocols to be maintained, to be practiced on the campuses.
Right.
And as a quick follow-up, since you have said that, now UGC as a statutory body, the announcement that there is going to be more of online, that you might even go up to 40%. I'm just looking at whether there is a possibility that UGC can take a leadership role and bring other statutory bodies like AICTE, NCTE, Bar Council, all others. Since online education is also going to be significantly a part of your calendar of activities, academic activities, then the number of days that you have to physically come to campus, which is 90 days for arts and science. Now, do you think that will also get a little shortened so that there is online presence and there is physical presence? And since there is increase in online presence, will there be a decrease in physical presence? Can UGC facilitate by talking to all such statutory bodies? Because each university has different types of institutions: teacher education, law, engineering, arts and science. So what do you think will be the position moving forward?
You have rightly said it, and I think earlier also, while we were devising ways and mechanisms for the online education, I appealed to all the statutory bodies, statutory councils, and we discussed together about the various aspects related to the online education. And we are working, we are one nation, and we are working for the nation. We should be stakeholder friendly, we should be student friendly, we should be student friendly. So in the interest of the students, in the interest of the higher education institutions, in the interest of the stakeholders in general, and also in the interest of the nation, whatever is required, I think everybody should be open to discuss and come together and find out some solutions which are workable and which facilitates the students to learn in a better way.
Okay. So actually the moment, in fact, you can call this an audience question because I'm asking on behalf of some of the academics.
Right.
Okay.
Who the moment they saw this event happening. So some of my academic friends sent me this question to ask it on their behalf. So
Okay.
representing them, you see the finance minister also came out with a lot of moratorium on the bank loans and on the financial side. Likewise, some of the academic institutions are also, expecting some sort of a moratorium because of COVID. Not that it has to be a freebie, but how do you think, certain relaxations or some cushioning can be made available to some institutions? For example, if you take NIRF ranking, now these 4 months of productive time is lost. NAC accreditation, 4 months of time is lost. And for institutions that will come for renewal or improving their rankings next year, 4 months of a loss in time cannot be compensated at all. So do you think you will extend the validity of rankings or NAC accreditation or any other form of academic cushioning that will kind of motivate institutions to bounce back stronger post-COVID so that they don't limp with COVIDian injuries in the academic campuses later?
I appreciate the concern of the friends from academia because you have asked it on behalf of the academic fraternity or the friends from academia. But this is the one thing which I cannot reply individually as chairman because whatever decision we have to, but I can, yes, voice your concerns in the respective, whether it is in the full commission, whether it is with the MHRD or whether it is with the other statutory bodies. And but yes, I am of the opinion. I myself has been Vice Chancellor of as you have mentioned, that whatever is best possible way to facilitate the institutions, keeping in view the COVID-19 pandemic, we should go in that direction. This is what I can say right now.
Right. Professor Singh, some questions from the audience.
Okay.
One from Lokesh. What steps is UGC taking to attract students who want to study abroad to study here and work here and make India grow?
It is already always we wished for it, but now because this COVID-19, as I mentioned earlier, is provided an opportunity that we can provide facilities in our best performing institutions for the students who were thinking to go abroad.
Right.
And therefore, I will appeal to the all best ranked institutions, whether they are best ranked in world rankings, whether they are best ranked in the India rankings, or the institutions which are best performing institutions under the NAC accreditation. They should think of having facilities on their campuses to attract these students, and also keeping in mind the courses of their choices.
Right. There's a question from Bala Murugan. Is there a plan to set up more IITs to increase high quality education?
This question relates to MHRD because we do not deal with the IIT. So maybe that can be sent to MHRD.
I think they look at you as someone who can answer every question related to MHRD.
Very nice of them, but I think I should not enter into others' territory.
There's Rahul Thakur who says UGC has given a lot of autonomy to institutions, but he says some of them are misusing it. Why is the MHRD not taking stricter action against colleges where students are involved in anti-national activities?
My request would be that if some specific cases are there,
Yeah.
some institutions that should be forwarded to, we will take up those cases with the concerned universities.
Also, I think the definition of anti-national is very fluid.
Yeah.
Shameen has asked, if you were made Vice Chancellor of JNU during these tough times, how would you have dealt with the students and restored the reputation of the university? This seems a very popular question, sir.
God has given me opportunity to heading the apex regulatory body. So now I will not think of going back as the Vice Chancellor of any university. But I think the Vice Chancellors, if one is open, discusses with the students, and then finds out solutions, and then situation normalizes.
Right. There is another question from Pramukh Mehdi. Is it possible to defer the PhD scholar fees because so many of them have no money to start their programs? Is there any step on the part of the government to defer the fee collection to help disadvantaged students, specifically for PhD?
About fees?
Yes.
PhD.
PhD. Actually, about fees, we have written a request letter to all the higher education institutions, keeping in view the COVID pandemic. And because we received some of the requests from the students to advise students not to have asked for the fees, particularly during this period. And we have requested the higher education institutions to consider their request sympathetically and may defer the fees for some time.
Right. And the last audience question from Venkatraman Badrinath is in the post-COVID world, what sort of support is the UGC giving to students who are poor and do not have access to great technology to access online classes?
Actually, under this Atmanirbhar Bharat announcements, which the Honorable Finance Minister has announced, they have announced about the PM E-Vidya program.
Right.
PM E-Vidya program, which also talks about the One Nation, One Digital Learning Platform. One Digital Learning Program, and it also talks about expanding the various modes of e-learning, including the channels which are the DTH channels, which are 32 right now, to have more channels on this. And I am aware that our Honorable Minister for HRD, Dr. Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank, he is in dialogue with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting to have more channels for such students who are there in the remote areas. So that is something which is now in the pipeline.
Yeah, so this is just, an immediate afterthought after listening to both the Honorable HRD's Minister as well as the UGC Chairman's speech this morning in NIRF, where there was the likelihood that NIRF itself could be a global ranking instrument. How NIRF itself can be global, that it need not be restricted only to rank Indian institutions. So how do we see NIRF shaping up in that direction as we move forward? And UGC as one of the critical stakeholders, how do you think you will prepare institutions and NIRF itself as a global ranking tool?
Actually, this is just a loud thinking right now, and maybe because if we think of Shanghai ranking, which started from one university, and then it became a world ranking university system. Similarly, maybe not now, but in the longer run, if we plan for this, then maybe we have to relook about the various parameters which are there in the India rankings, and then maybe we have to think of some other names also. We can start with some SAARC countries, and but whatever we plan, it should be thoughtfully done. It should be in consultation with the academic fraternity. It should be in consultation with the global authorities also, so that once we launch it or we expand it, it should be well appreciated and it should be well received.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Vaidya. Thank you very much, Professor Singh. You've been very generous in your answers, and you've shown immense good spirit. And we wish you all the best, and hope the same kind of a dialogue that got you through, you know, all the 3 tenures in universities continues with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And don't forget to read tomorrow's headlines news.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.